is our time now once again for getting lumped up with my friends. It's RockerMike and Rob that you should know, and you'll find them here on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show.
About the group Big Star, they probably wrote 3 of the greatest albums never heard. All the albums were fucking good, amazing album from beginning to end.
I think Rolling Stone actually puts all three albums in their top 500.
Dude, let me tell you, these guys were as big as the Beatles, the Rolling Stone, the Byrds, and they just they couldn't do it. The other guy, Alex, actually went on to produce and do other great stuff. The rest of the group, especially
Chris Bell.
Chris Bell, man, what fuck up, man? Can you tell me a little bit of...
Well, I mean, he was before the band was formed. He knew Alex Chilton. Okay?
Yeah,
and they were friends. They actually were friends from being like young teenagers. They saw the Beatles together, stuff like that. And Chris had a band. I'm going to go into it in a little bit.
Yeah.
And when Chilton, was looking to put together something, he ended up connecting with him, and the band that Chris already had in place kind of morphed into Big Star. And Chris was I mean, from what I could tell, the little bit of material out there's not a lot, okay, but the guy was a musical genius,
Yeah.
But he had a lot of personal demons, and like all of us, and he unfortunately, was killed in an accident and all that. But
yeah, what's a fucked up accident too? Like a light post fell on him or something, right? Like
he crashed into a lamppost. I think it fell on him, that kind of thing.
Let me answer a question. But I also think he lived under. For some reason, I think he always had to prove himself to Alex, because he seemed like to write the letter, like he could put the lyrics like nothing. And
well, remember, Alex had hit singles in the box tops. Before,
the letter,
the letter, and Cry Like a Baby was him also.
Yeah,
and that I mean, Memphis is a small town.
Yeah,
and both of them were well known. Okay, but Alex had the hits, and when Big Star was formed, rock critics loved them right away, and immediately would concentrate more on what Alex was doing in the band, which they did kind of in the beginning ignore Chris. I think later on, when they were rediscovered many years later, I think Chris Bell was mentioned a lot more, but unfortunately it was too late. He was already gone.
Yeah, because Alex put the group down later on together, and they played for a few years. You know that? And I think
of course, that was in the 90s when they had this resurgence. They're kind of like I think in that documentary, No One Can Hurt Me Now, right? That's what it's called.
Very good.
Lenny Kaye, actually, from Patti Smith's band, Lenny Kaye actually says it well. He says how Big Star was like a jewel in the sand, okay, and he had to dig him out. And that's true, because I never heard of him until, I want to say, late 90s, okay? They had already started coming around again. I had never heard of him. And I knew who Alex Chilton was. I knew he had a solo career. I knew that he produced the Cramps and stuff like that. And but I didn't know about Big Star. And it was like these 3 amazing albums. I really like Radio City and the first one a lot. The third one is good. It's very good. It's a little on the depressing side, but it's good. Chilton was an interesting guy, and he's one of these guys that I kind of regret never seeing live. I had an opportunity once or twice, and I just didn't go. I should have. I do like his music though, like his solo stuff and things like that.
You want to hear something? They almost like jinxed themselves with the name Big Star. And
there was a supermarket. There was a supermarket named Big Star in Memphis.
Yeah, it was actually, I think when I saw the documentary, there was a place that they ate at, like a diner set for the Big Star.
No, it was an actual supermarket.
But I remember they showed they showed the place and it say Big Star because they didn't even know a name for the band.
They just were like, I think when they named the band, it was like they didn't have a name, they didn't have an idea really, and they just took the first thing that came to mind because the Big Star grocery store was across the street from Ardent Record Studios. Okay, so yeah, I mean, they in the documentary they talk about how I think it's Jody Stephens that says, you know, I didn't like the name that much because I felt it was pretentious. You know, like it was pretentious. Oh, we're big stars, you know, but we're not, you know.
But even the number one record.
Yeah.
Number one record.
they didn't jinx themselves. They got screwed over by Stax and Stax Records and then Columbia Records, and you know, because the record was out there, and that's the sad thing about Big Star the most is the music was out there. And people were hearing about it from rock critics. Lester Bangs loved them.
Everybody loved them. Everybody.
Yeah, everybody loved them. And the music was out there, but you couldn't find it. If you heard the song on the radio, because DJs had the record, if you heard the song on the radio and you liked it, you couldn't find it in the store. That's messed up.
That's crazy.
Happens. Yeah.
You know what they were saying? They were like almost like they got all the critics to come down and see them, like a union, like United. And it was like the who's of critics, and they were dancing.
That was a big, amazing thing that they were able to accomplish with that. Everybody to come down and see them. That was after number one record was out and Radio City was about to come out. They managed to get this Rock Writers Convention and play there, and you know. That was a big thing to help push the band. But again, you couldn't find the records.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible that you couldn't even find them. And there were people talking in the documentary. We were trying to find the album. We couldn't find it. I heard the song on the radio. Then they would go to the store and they couldn't find the fucking album.
I know. And they didn't even realize they had a problem at first. It was kind of like they discovered it because people were calling up Ardent and saying, you know, the record's not around. You know, and then they realized, I think it was Stax probably knew about it. I think Stax was, you know, going down the drain anyway at that point. They had distribution problems. There was money problems. They would eventually, within a couple of years, they would fold and leave Ardent Records, which was a subsidiary of Stax. They would leave them out on their own, you know. So that was, you know, by the time that happened, I think Alex was pretty much, you know, done with the band. He was doing his own stuff at that point.
Yeah.
And he would get sucked back into it once that the third album came out. But you know, let's get into it because it's a great story.
All right.
So you got to mention Alex Chilton when you talk about Big Star. Absolutely. He was born in Memphis in 1950, and he was the lead singer to the soul group The Box Tops. Everybody remembers the song "The Letter," "Cry Like a Baby." Those were their two big hits. Now they broke up in 1970, pretty much when Alex left the band. Interesting enough is "The Letter." That song was around. He actually had performed that in local Memphis bands prior to being in the Box Tops. It's a little different the way he used to do it, but it was a song that he had before that. Now, when the Box Tops broke up, Alex spent some time in New York, and he wrote and released a solo album at that point. I think it's just called Alex Chilton, and he was actually hanging out with Roger McGuinn from the Byrds a little bit at that point, and he was like a kind of an influence on him. Now, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the band, was looking for a lead singer. And they asked Alex, but he actually turned them down, saying they were too commercial. He didn't like them. So he ended up in 1971 moving back to Memphis, where he was from, and connecting with an old friend of his named Chris Bell. Chris Bell was a guy that he knew back when they were young teenagers. They saw the Beatles together. Okay. They were both really influenced by them, and that was kind of for both of them, that was their inroads into music, going to see the Beatles and all that.
You know what? Chris Bell was almost like musical savant. Like he put it together. He could compose. he knew how to put music together because he pretty much did the album himself without real production or anything.
Yeah. I mean, once Big Star was together and ready to record, they let Bell, produce the album basically, even though he's not credited, but he did know what he was doing in the studio. Yeah.
Yeah, remember.
And you would think Alex would know, because he had recorded with the Box Tops. But I don't think Alex gave a shit too much.
But later on in life, he like take that for a producer,
Oh yeah, of course he would. He would.
And he did some very good bands too. So
he did. And there's a lot of money in that, if you can get into producing. So originally, when Alex and Chris Bell were hanging out, they were thinking of doing, well, it was really like Alex's idea. He wanted to do like a Simon and Garfunkel type thing, like a duo. And Bell was like, "Nah, I'm not interested in that." He had a band, a band called Ice Water, and it was a three-piece consisting of Chris Bell on guitar and vocals, drummer Jody Stephens, and bassist Andy Hummel. All right. Now they invited Alex down to go see them. They were very popular in the Memphis area. Memphis is an interesting place because you have this like combination mix of country, rock and roll, rockabilly, and soul music, Memphis soul music. Okay, and it's all kind of like very intertwined into the society of Memphis and kind of like very to itself and very different than anywhere else. Like when punk rock got to Memphis, the kind of music was different than what you were hearing everywhere else. But Chris was in a band called Ice Water that was very popular in the local area, and he invited Alex down, and Alex was very impressed. He really liked him. He had written a song called "Watch the Sunrise," and he played it for them, and they were impressed with it, and they were just like, "Look, join our band. Okay, we'll make it a 4-piece." And he agreed. He went for it. And they would change their name to Big Star. The Ice Water name would go away. And they used the 5-pointed logo with it. That was going to be their logo. And like we said before, it was really kind of like off the cuff. We need a name. And there happened to be a supermarket called Big Star, and it sounded good. So they used that, They kind of began playing around Memphis right away. They did a lot of shows in the beginning, and they were very well received. Alex was very well known in Memphis, obviously, for his Box Tops fame. And, he was a popular guy anyway, even prior to that in Memphis. Bell's popularity, in Ice Water definitely made Big Star a top draw to see live, Chris Bell and Alex wanted to kind of base their songwriting off of John Lennon and Paul McCartney. So what they would do is they would write and make it like they would call it a Bell Chilton composition, like Lennon McCartney. Most of the songs that when Chris was in the band were written and credited that way. They went into Ardent Studios in Memphis, which was actually a part of Stax Records. Like I said, they were a subsidiary. Ardent Records was a small label, and they actually, around the time of Big Star signing with them, Stax was kind of changing. They were under the control of Al Bell. He was like the president of Stax, and Stax wanted to have like a rock music subsidiary, and that's what Ardent became. And it's kind of like what Motown did. Motown had a rock label. Remember we talked about that? It was the same kind of idea. And Stax was kind of they were kind of into their second generation of soul music. Otis Redding, which had put them on the map pretty much, had died, unfortunately. And they had a whole new group of people. So they were looking to expand into rock music, and Ardent was a Memphis local label that could help them do that. So if you remember the documentary, they had a pretty good state of the art studio at
Yeah,
Ardent.
the studio was pretty good.
Yeah, so they would get a lot of overflow of if Stax couldn't handle as many people recording, they would go to Ardent and not just do rock bands. They would be doing like Booker T and the MGs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
But they would sneak into the studio at night because I guess they were going to a school and then they would go there at night and record because everybody pretty much had keys and they were able to go there and record at night. So these guys,
the school was actually in the studio.
In the studio, right?
John Fry, the founder of Ardent, he would train producers and engineers and stuff like that during the day. But I don't think that had so much to do with Big Star. I think it was more like so they could keep up with the overflow from Stax and have enough guys. So I'm sure that studio had to be going 24 hours a day. Had to be.
Yeah, because these guys
recording
pretty much
all day and night.
Because they were saying these guys were sneaking in at night doing the album, the Big Star album. They would go there at night and record hours. Like they would work all day and then just go to the studio at night because they all had keys.
Yeah, no, they were all friends with John Fry and they were all getting along. And Chris Bell was obviously in the studio he was great, and they just let him produce it, and Fry would kind of like oversee things a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, this kind of magic between Bell and Chilton at Ardent would become the music of Big Star would become what's known as power pop, in my opinion. Okay.
Yeah, or even alternative,
really
right?
Well, yeah, in a way, because I think that's kind of a little bit. There was no alternative in those days. There was no power pop in those days. It was just rock and roll. Okay.
Yeah.
But what they were doing was very different at a time when most bands were very heavy. Okay. Everything sounded like
everybody was heavy.
Heavy like Blue Cheer and that kind of sound. Early 70s. They were like doing. I mean, sometimes Big Star, if you listen to it, you could hear like a little bit of the Byrds, jangly guitars. You could hear they would get heavy. Okay, you could hear like some kind of heavy sound that was different for the time. Okay, mixed in with like a Beatles pop sensibility. Just very unique. And I mean, obviously they could be considered one of the first, alternative bands in a way. Okay, but
even like new wave, because they were pretty much like that weird kind of group that you didn't even know where to put them. Because they were like a little bit of country, a little bit of rock and roll. It was weird because you listen to them sound like a country, but they also sound like, oh, these guys are also jamming, which was weird. Because they did the song.
A song could change, mid tempo, and it just go like from a slow, and they could just get heavy, then go back.
Yeah.
I mean, it was they were very, very innovative, and I think in the beginning,
but
Chris Bell,
they did the theme song for the '70s show. I never knew that until I started listening to that.
I didn't realize that. It's actually Cheap Trick doing it.
Yeah, but they weren't one of the guys.
Song.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
that's
song,
amazing.
But it's Cheap Trick. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you hear it on that '70s show, it's Cheap Trick doing it.
Yeah.
But it's they were influenced by Big Star, which I'll get into. The only other bands, in my opinion, around the same time that were doing something similar would be like the Raspberries, and kind of there was a band called Blue Ash that had been around since about 69, 70. Both these bands were from Ohio. Okay, so this was a different part of the country, but you can't think of really too many bands that really were doing this kind of sound. And I mentioned those two because they're great. They're really known as, especially the Raspberries are known as power pop. But all that at the time was there wasn't the genre called that. Okay, so the only two bands I could think of similar would be those two. But working in the studio, they would often Bell and Chilton weren't always there at the same time. They would go back, go over the stuff that was recorded earlier, add a layer of vocals on top. Often they worked separately. And one thing too is that they didn't really write songs in the studio. When they went into the studio, it was really just to record. They had everything all arranged. They had everything all figured out. So it was a very quick way of recording. They did that album very quickly. Sometimes Chilton, who was kind of like the edgier guy in the band, okay, he would put like some, heavy guitar or something on it, and Bell would put down some vocal harmonies on top of everything. So the album was going to be called Number One Record. All right.
Yeah.
And to me, like the main songs off it, like, is Feel, My Life Is Right, Try Again, the Ballad of El Goodo, okay, which is a great song. In the Street, we just mentioned that.
Yeah.
There was a ballad called 13, and then also Watch the Sunrise, the song that Alex had played for them originally, that was recorded by the band.
But even the album from beginning, from the first song to the end song, they're pretty much, it was in a flow. The way Bell put the album, it was a continuous flow. It had no, like, it was just
here's the album.
It's fucking great. Great album, man.
Yeah. This is like one of the greatest. I would put it in like one of the top 20, top 30 best albums of all time. You got to have this. And the second one, Radio City.
Pretty much that's the logo of the Super Vodka. If they put Star in there, they would have been sued.
Right. I know. It's funny how they did that. But you know what? They were really a Memphis band. So it's kind of like they were almost, 1-1 with Memphis. When you thought of Big Star, you thought of Memphis in those days, There was one track written by bassist Andy Hummel, okay, a song called the India Song. But the rest, like I said, were written basically by Alex or Bell or both, okay, and usually credited to both.
Yeah.
Now, producer and Ardent Records founder John Fry, he got a production credit for the number one record. But Chris Bell, like we said, really handled all the bulk of the productions. He put in a lot of long, late hours working on this. He put his heart and soul into it. It's such a unique sounding album because it's a combination of being raw and being polished. It's a very unique sounding album. The guitar sound on it is very unique. It's polished in the sense it is a produced album. It's not live in the studio. It's very produced. Okay, but they just got this raw sound down. Chris Bell was really, really good at it. When Big Star's album came out, number one record, it was released in August of '72. The record immediately got widespread acclaim. Basically, over the next 6 months that the album was out, critics were raving about it. It would gain some popularity through touring. They went on a little bit of a tour through the nation. But Stax Records couldn't keep up with the distribution. Okay. And that really was the main problem, like we were discussing a little bit before. Critics would be writing about the band. People would be seeing them live, but you couldn't find the album. And it hurt them. That really hurt the band big time. They ended up only selling about 10,000 copies of that album.
That's insane.
And it was a major label. It was Stax was a big label at that time. You just couldn't find the album, and people would call Ardent and be like, "Where's the album?" They'd be like, "We don't know. It's supposed to be out." Stax at the time was probably being mishandled, misrun. Okay, just run poorly. I think that there was a lot going on there. We have to do a show about Stax. Stax is a very interesting label. I've been thinking about that. Just talking about
they were talking about it. They were bashing it like a little bit because it seemed they were going through some shit when they started doing all this stuff.
Yeah. Now, what they did when Stax, knew they had a problem. Whatever the cause of it, I'm not really sure. But they ended up making a deal with Columbia Records.
Yeah.
Right? And it was for redistribution, distribution of all their catalog, not just Big Star, because Big Star, we're talking about them, but they weren't the only ones hit by, this whole distribution problem. So Columbia gets on board. They're a major distribution label in the country, and they say, okay, we're gonna distribute the whole Stax catalog, including Ardent, records, which was the rock label for Stax. But shortly after the deal, it kind of falls apart. Okay, and they never really distribute the album. In fact, they kind of bury it. All right, because I don't know if Columbia intentionally meant to do it or just didn't see any profit worthwhile in pushing Ardent. But Big Star Records were actually whatever little bit was out there was recalled. It was removed from the shelves. So and labels do that. Like labels will get in touch with record stores and say, well, back when there were record stores, right? They would say, okay, just send these back. We'll refund you. Okay, and you do it. Okay, and then the record is gone, and that used to happen sometimes. It really created. Bell was putting his heart and soul into this, and he was a very serious guy. He was a sensitive guy, and he put his heart and soul into this, and this kind of crushed him. He was like, "This is an album that I put my whole life into, and it's just not getting out there." And he was doing drugs. They were all doing drugs, and everybody was in the 70s. He was drinking a lot. I think there was some emotional problems there, probably. He had some conflicts in his life. You could see a little bit of that in the documentary when you watch it.
Yeah, he was depressed. He was a little depressed.
Well, he was depressed. He had conflicts about religion. Okay, he became a devout Christian eventually, but he was also conflicted about his sexuality too.
I think he was gay. He just didn't know it.
So they don't go. Maybe he knew it and he didn't like it. I don't know. I'm not gonna. I don't know much. There's not much about that in his life.
Yeah, but there was definitely demon in there, and I think there was definitely demon in there. He to the point he almost like hated Alex in a way. In a little way, he was envious by him.
I think and Alex wasn't the easiest guy to work with. Yeah. Okay, he had his shit going on too, and I'm sure he had his ego, and he I don't know if he thought of it at that point as just his band. I mean, there's interviews I've seen where he would rave about Chris Bell. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And say fantastic things about him. He didn't really shit on him, but I think that Chris was doing a lot of work, and Alex was kind of getting the credit for it, and I think that bugged him. I think it got under his skin a little bit.
I think that's what it was.
And a combination of that and the album just not, being successful. Everybody telling him how great it is. He would read about the album in Cream magazine, for instance, and they would be raving about it, but you couldn't find it anywhere. And this is what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to be a musician. He wanted to be a rock star. To see that kind of like just, being held back by bullshit, is really got to drive you crazy. But also what would happen is these guys were all, in their early 20s.
Yeah.
And, they were looking at their life ahead of them and being like, well, if this isn't going to work, what are we going to do? And it created a lot of tension in the band. And Andy Hummel and Bell would actually get into some physical confrontations with each other. They had a bit of a falling out.
Really fucked up.
Yeah. There was at one point, like, Hummel punched Bell in the face, and then Bell retaliated by smashing his bass guitar into pieces. And then he retaliated by by jamming a screwdriver through Bell's acoustic guitar. Okay,
Yeah.
so they were doing shit to each other.
So even to
in
the
November,
point that Bell
yeah,
attacked Fry's car.
he what?
Bell attacked Fry's car. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Even
Fry.
Fry was, yeah. John Fry was involved
Yeah.
in the fighting too. You know,
Yeah.
it just was a lot of frustrations going on. You know, Bell was going through this kind of severe depression
Yeah.
by the end of '72, and Big Star was kind of done. Okay, after a few months in early '73, Chilton, Stephens, and Hummel put the band back together, minus Chris Bell. Chris was out. Okay, he left the band. He couldn't deal with it anymore, and a few months afterwards, there was interest still in the band, and so they reformed, but without Chris Bell. Okay, and
That's that's
John.
crazy.
Well, you know, obviously maybe they couldn't work together. Okay,
Yeah.
but Bell was still around. Okay, he was slightly involved in some of the songwriting of the next album, which is called Radio City. All right.
Yeah.
But Big Star at that point was just a 3-piece with Alex kind of leading the band at that point. There's tracks like "Oh My Soul," "Back of a Car." These were Bell compositions that had been around that they used.
Yeah.
He didn't get any credit. Chilton now was basically he was kind of writing songs by committee. Everybody was involved. The album Radio City was again recorded at Ardent, released in February of '74 to critical acclaim again. Okay, so this is about a year and a half later, and they got a new album out. Again, the critics love it. I think it's a masterpiece. It's heavier in some ways than number one record. It's just a great compliment, the two of them together. Okay,
it really is.
Yeah, they're almost like it's like a continuation in a way. Now the singles they would release off of Radio City would be "Oh My Soul," which is probably my favorite track off the album, and then "September Girls," which is a classic.
Yeah, that's a good song.
Yeah. But again, the album had the same distribution problems like the number one record. Okay. It sold twice as much, though. It actually sold about 20,000 albums at that point. Again, now you're talking just 2 albums, 30,000 albums sold. It's not a lot. All right. People were hearing about this band, and again, you just couldn't find the records.
Think about a million album. They probably would have sold a million album right away.
I think when you listen to those two, you have to kind of wonder why they didn't.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Why did they not sell more? Well, you couldn't find it. You couldn't find it.
Yeah, couldn't find it.
Remember, there was no internet in those days. There was no way to find the record. I mean, I remember searching records out. If I was looking for one, I would hit 5 or 10 record stores that I knew about, and eventually, sometimes you had to order it. All right, you had to mail order it, you know, and that was always a pain in the ass. But you know, it's not supposed to be that way when you're on a major label. So they really got screwed with this again.
Because check it out, a lot of disc jockey had the album. They were playing the album because they liked the fucking album. And then you can't find the fucking album, but there was DJs playing the song.
Right, and national magazines will be writing about them. Rolling Stone. Okay, you had critics like Lester Bangs, Robert Christgau. Okay, Robert Christgau actually called Radio City brilliant, addictive, and twisted. I'm just paraphrasing, but he said like Chilton's. You could tell like Chilton's eccentric behavior was very apparent on this album, okay? Because he was very eccentric. Even in the box tops, you could tell he was like kind of out there. He'd be standing with the box tops. He'd have like a cigarette and a cigarette holder, you know, looking like FDR with the big cigarette holder. You know, yeah, it's kind of funny, like this hippie looking guy, you know, with that, you know. But it's an album of perfect power pop perfection. Okay, that's the way I like to look at it. But when you to it, you know, lyrically and stuff, there's this like melancholy sadness to it. Okay, this sadness to some of the lyrics and things, and it's an all over the place emotional album. Okay, um, they loved again rock writers love the band. Critics love them left and right, and that's when and Ardent Records knew that. Okay, their management knew that. They had a publicist that was very into them. Okay, and they arranged the Rock Writers Convention to be in Memphis in over Memorial Day weekend in 1973. And this was something that was done every year in different places where the rock writers would get together. Okay, um, and really, in a way, it was to spotlight Big Star because Big Star was the headlining band to see at the convention. They were playing there. Radio City wasn't out yet at that point. Okay, it was being worked on and written, and they had some of the songs. They did play everything from Number One Record, and they did play whatever new material they had at that point. And if you remember in the documentary we watched, it was like the Rock Riders didn't give a shit about anybody else. And then when Big Star came on, they all went crazy. They were all dancing around. Everybody was wasted. Lester Bangs was taking speed like candy, right?
Yeah, they were all like,
and, one guy was dancing in his underwear, right?
Yeah, it's Tidy Whitey that would say.
It's Tidy
Whitey.
Yeah,
having the time of his life.
Yeah. Now, by September of '74, again, all the problems with distribution, the band wasn't making any money. Hummel would leave. Okay, he would actually, I believe, go back to college. So all you were left with in Big Star was Chilton and Stephens. All right, Stephens being the drummer. They did decide, though, to go back into the studio, and they would use some different musicians and work on a new album. The working title to the album was Third, also called Sister Lovers / Sister Lovers. Okay, and they would be back at Ardent again. Okay, and it's amazing too because today you could never do this. If you had number one record bomb the way it bombed, you'd be bye-bye. Okay, you'd be dropped from the label. Okay.
But it didn't bomb because of them. It bombed because of the label. Why would the label cut them? They go, but they're not distributing it right. They're not doing the right thing by them.
Well, that was probably taken into consideration as to not drop them, but you weren't making any money, and you were still sinking money into the band. Okay, you're still giving them recording time, but John Fry from Ardent, he really believed in them. I mean, probably more than any other band on his label.
Yeah.
Okay. And when the two of them, Chilton and Stephens, went back into the studio, they actually would complete a new album. Okay. They would be doing some live shows. They had picked up a bass player. They had done a couple of things. But by early '75, they would have this new album called Third. And they weren't going to put it out right away. What would happen is they would press about 250 copies.
Yeah.
And John Fry and the management of Big Star, the publicist that they had, would go around and promote it. Okay. Chilton now was really writing songs alone for the band. They would go take 250 of these records pressed and take it and just give it out to DJs, give it out to record companies, trying to push the new record, even though they didn't really have a distributor at that point.
Yeah, nothing.
Okay? So Fry put all his money into it, just to get these 250 records pressed. Third is, Rolling Stone magazine would call it years later, untidy, beautiful, but disturbing.
Yeah.
All right. And it is. It's kind of like a depressing album. And, doing the research, I'm going to throw this out there. I don't know I'm sure some Big Star fans are going to be watching us. I'm going to throw this out there because it kind of came to me last night when I was listening to some music and just getting ready for the show. That's what I do every week. I kind of I'll just immerse myself into what, we're going to be talking about. And I kind of realized that Lou Reed and Alex Chilton kind of have something in common. Like Chilton was kind of like Memphis's Lou Reed in a way, and
Yeah.
Big Star was kind of like Memphis's Velvet Underground. And I never thought of that before, and I think it's kind of like a good comparison because they were like the quintessential underground band,
Yeah.
okay, for Memphis, and Chilton was a son of Memphis in a way. You know, I mean, he was from there, and just like Lou Reed was from New York, uh, and he had a style that was similar to a Memphis style. And Lou embodied New York, and I just kind of caught that connection between the two. Where Bell is almost like a John Cale from the Velvet Underground, you know, kind of like this overlooked genius who would, Cale is still with us and went on to much bigger and bigger and better things. Bell, unfortunately, his life would be cut short. But at that point, in between 72, 73, Bell working with Alex, it was almost like a Lou Reed, John Cale kind of thing. Okay, maybe not as avant-garde, maybe a little more
Yeah.
rock and roll, but definitely like symbolic of the places they were from. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I thought that was an interesting comparison.
That is a very good comparison.
Yeah, thanks. There was a guy named Jim Dickinson, another Memphis guy.
Yeah.
Okay, he had his own musical career. He was very well respected. He would get involved with producing this album. Okay, and basically, he was friends with Alex, and Alex had some music, and he showed it to him, and he said, "Why don't you produce it?" And he did. Okay, between John Fry and Jim Dickinson now on board, they took these 250 copies and really tried to push this album.
They were
Okay,
definitely moving around.
yeah, there was a track called Holocaust
Yeah.
on this album, which is a classic. You have to hear it. That's all I could say. It's dark. It's a little catchy too. It's just kind of like it hits you almost like the way a Velvet Underground song would hit you.
Yeah, it
Okay,
was haunting. It's haunted, man.
haunting, exactly. But they couldn't get anybody interested in picking up the band to distribute it. They went to New York City. They would play some live shows at Max's and stuff like that. Music was changing by that point, and I have to mention what was going on. Now, before I get into that, what was going on with Alex, but before I get into that, we're talking about 1975, 76. There was this underground scene going on in CBGB's.
Yeah.
And Max's as well in New York City, and it was catching the attention of Alex. Now, the album that he worked on third would not come out then. It would come out in 1978.
Yeah,
So
it took a while.
they would shelve it because they really couldn't get any interest in it. But Alex would come to New York. He would have a band. He would put a band together, and I think it was called Alex Chilton and the Cossacks. Okay. They would play CBGBs. He was becoming interested in what was going on with bands like Television. Terry Ork, who managed Television, would put out some Alex Chilton music. He was becoming a fixture on the New York scene, and everybody respected him. Now, remember, he was still a young guy. He was only about 26 at that, 25, 26 at that point, because he started so young in the box tops. Okay, he was a teenager in the box tops. When Chris Bell, man, we got to talk about him here. When he left Big Star in '72, he would actually work on a solo album. He would be recording some stuff. Wouldn't have any takers for it, but the music would be recorded. He would be living in a few different European countries. He had an older brother, David Bell, who was living in France. So that was his connection to Europe, and I think they connected with each other. They were kind of living together in some different places, traveling around Europe. And David Bell was actually like an amateur photographer or something, and he had some great pictures of Chris, which would end up being used on his solo record when it would come out many years later. But what would happen is interesting. EMI Records would pick up the first two Big Star albums, and they would release them in the UK. Ardent didn't even know about this. They didn't even know that they bought it from Stax. Okay.
Wow.
Stax by that point in the mid to late 70s didn't even exist anymore. They had folded. Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess the catalog was kind of spread out, and nobody knew what really happened, who controlled Big Star at that point. And they didn't even really think about it. So it turned out that the first two albums, Number One Record and Radio City, was actually released in the UK as a double album. And for some reason, it took off. And actually, the press, like New Musical Express, the press in the UK, picked up on it. And they, people were being influenced. Some of the remaining punk bands by 78, some of what would be kind of like a UK power pop scene, guys like Nick Lowe, guys like Robin Hitchcock, guys that would eventually in Scotland become like the Jesus and Mary Chain, Teenage Fan Club. Everybody was starting to listen to Big Star based on this double album release. But again, the band didn't know anything about it. It would all kind of come together. Chris Bell became aware of it. Okay. But unfortunately he would not live to really see the success of it. Okay.
Because what happened saw it.
No, it was just a terrible thing. He was back in Memphis.
Yeah.
He was working. And I think he was driving home one night or something, and he just got into a car accident. He lost control of the car. He didn't get into a car accident with another car, but he lost control of his car and crashed into a lamppost, and he died.
You know what? No drugs, no nothing. They didn't find nothing.
Nothing. No, they think some people think he might have fell asleep at the wheel, okay, or something distracted him. These things happen. A squirrel can run in front of your car. He had been working on something called "I Am the Cosmos."
Yeah.
And the single for that would come out, okay, during his lifetime. So he was very proud of that single. I had made this it was a lumped up song of the night last night, and somebody wrote on it how this is a great song and a great album. Many years later, Bell's stuff would come out, okay. After Big Star had a resurgence back in the 90s, people would look back and say, hey, what happened to Chris Bell? He's kind of written out of the whole history of Big Star because he's only really on the first album.
Yeah.
But, and people became interested in it. I guess it was his family who had control of it. They put everything out. And it's had a huge cult following. You know who continues to write about Big Star a lot? And actually, I was trying to remember how I had first heard of the band. And I think it was through Ugly Things magazine. Okay. Mike Stax, who's the main editor for that. I've raved about Ugly Things many times. And I think that's where I probably first heard about the band. And when Chris Bell had that stuff released after his death many years later, I remember Ugly Things having a big write-up about it, So it's good. It's good stuff. The third album was not released yet. No. Okay. Now in the UK, the two albums were done as a double. In the United States, you had them released separately, but you couldn't find them anywhere. Okay. They had a bit of a cult following though. Okay. Even among the little bit of people that did buy it. Okay. Because over the years, bands like Cheap Trick, bands like The Replacements.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna do a show. We're gonna do a show about them next year. Cheap Trick, The Replacements, REM would say that they were big time influenced by Big Star.
All these bands, yeah.
These are American bands I'm talking about, and one band you'd be kind of surprised, but actually, if you know them, you're not, and that's Kiss. Kiss was very influenced by Big Star, and Paul Stanley said it was because of the hooks in the songs. And he's right. I mean, Chilton and Bell could write a great hook in a song and
Yeah.
just suck you into that catchiness. Okay. And Kiss is, they got catchy songs, right? So
Yeah, it's
you could tell.
definitely
Yeah, yeah. Now, the third album called Third, even
like
though
if
there
you
were two.
listen to the Detroit Rock City, sounds a lot like the theme song from
It
the
could have been on
'70s
Radio
show.
City. It could have been
Yeah,
on Radio City. Yeah. Good
it could
point.
have been
Good
it
point.
could have been on the '70s show, the opening too.
Yeah, yeah,
It's almost the
definitely,
same.
definitely.
It's almost the same song, but it's dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Think
Yep,
about it.
yep.
It's
A
the
very,
same song.
very catchy tune. Um, the album only had 250 copies out at that point,
That's
1978.
crazy.
It was never really, but it was kind of bootlegged. All right, and people that were in the know, knew music, they were like, yeah, this is third album that was never released by Big Star, and sometimes it was called Third, sometimes it was called Beale Street Green, sometimes it was recorded as Sister Lovers, okay,
Yeah,
on a
Sister
bootleg.
Lover.
And the Sister Lovers is an interesting title because it refers to the fact that Alex Chilton and Jody Stephens were dating sisters, these two girls, Lisa and Holiday Aldridge. And Alex had a pretty contentious relationship with Lisa. Interesting story there. Um,
Yeah,
finally, what would happen
didn't
is
she like sing some vocal also on one of the
on
that
that album.
album?
Yes, on that album. He was with her for quite a few years. They would come out finally in '78. The album would come out officially, okay, and it would be released in the UK and the United States. Didn't do that well. It did probably better in the UK because they were more into them, but
Yeah.
it did sell. It did sell some copies. Now the band was no more at that point, though. Okay, in '78, Alex had moved to New York. He was doing his own solo stuff. In 1980, he would produce the Cramps.
Yeah, I
Okay, their
saw that.
first album called He produced songs "The Lord Taught Us." They would record down in Memphis, and that we discussed it last year, and it was early this year at
Yeah.
the Cramps, the 2-part Cramp show that we did for the rock show.
Yeah.
That was a crazy recording session. They said that Alex was, drinking out of his mind, and it was amazing how he even got anything done. But it's still a great album. Songs the Lord Taught Us. He was also involved and recorded on one of the albums for Tav Falco and the Panther Burns. Okay, and he's an interesting guy, Tav Falco, rockabilly guy, little
Yeah.
crazy, little out there. He still plays. He played Bowery Electric last year, I think. He's still around.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, over the next 15 years, American acts, like I was saying, like Cheap Trick, REM, Kiss, acknowledged this influence of Big Star. Okay. And people were asking Alex about it over the years, and he would be like, nah, not doing anything with that. Okay. It's dead. I can't write like that anymore. Okay. I can't do anything with that. And somehow, in 1993, he was convinced by people to reform Big Star. Now, Chris was gone, unfortunately, so that wasn't going to bring him in.
Yeah.
And Andy Hummel wasn't really interested in 1993. So what they did was they ended up getting a guy named John Auer and Ken Stringfellow from the band called the Posies, which were also Big Star influenced. They got the band back together, and they made their debut at the University of Missouri in the spring of 1993. It was part of a festival kind of thing.
Yep.
Now, Zoo Records was going to put this out as a live show, which they did eventually. They also had an appearance on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
I remember that.
93.
That's the
I
only
do
time
remember
I
that
ever
too.
heard. I remember watching. I was like, Big Star. Who the fuck is Big Star? That was my only reaction.
I know.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like by the mid '90s, I had pretty much heard of them, but they were around for a few years before that, before I even knew about them. And I did see that Jay Leno thing, and I didn't really give it much thought. I should have.
Yeah, I
It
saw that. I saw that. I remember seeing that because I was up and they were like the musical guests, and he introduced it. I'm like, who are these guys?
Yeah. I mean, I knew who Alex Chilton was. Okay, but I'm like, who are these other guys? And then they were around years ago, and no one bought their records. At the time, it just didn't spark an interest in me. It took a couple of
Yeah.
years, but now they would play live for a while after '93. They kind of had achieved this like cults. People were coming to see them out of curiosity too. Really, what's this old band that is supposed to be like an American Beatles almost? They were being touted as. Okay, they were basically doing everything off the 3 albums. They had some new material that they were starting to work on, but by 2004, 11 years into the reunion, they would hit the studio for the first time. They would come out with a new album that would be released in 2005 called In Space. Came out on Rykodisc in that year, 2005. Critics liked it. Okay. David Frick, he's still around, thank God. He's one of the best rock critics that we've ever seen that's still around for Rolling Stone. He kind of said it best. He said, the American Beatles expectation is unrealistic. Okay. I remember reading this. And it was, because after so many years and achieving that cult status, it's hard to create like a great album. And Alex's songwriting had kind of changed. Okay,
Yeah.
he had been influenced by the '70s punk scene a little bit, so he was kind of like minimalistic now. He wasn't writing these like big songs anymore like he did for Big Star. So it kind of like In Space is a good record, and there's moments of it where he recaptures that Big Star greatness. But to me, it kind of plays like a Chilton solo record. Okay, and I guess when you're really dealing with just 2 original guys, and Jody Stephens really just being a drummer, he wasn't so involved with the writing. Though he's very talented, I'm not knocking him. It was really just Alex doing his thing, and that's just the way it worked out. I mean, had Chris Bell lived, I'm sure he would have been involved with that reunion. That's a shame
definitely.
too.
That definitely has changed.
Now they would play for the next few years, about 5 years, and tragedy would strike again in 2010. Before a show, a couple of days before a show at the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas, Alex was in New Orleans, and he suffered a fatal heart attack. Okay. When the fans heard about it, everybody was crushed. When the band heard about it, everybody, they were crushed. And there was kind of a debate as to what to do. And the initial response would be like, well, cancel the show at South by Southwest. But they decided to put it together almost as a tribute. Okay.
Yep.
And Mike Mills, one of the members of REM, helped out, and he would perform with them. There was a bunch of people from different bands. They would even get Andy Hummel back, who didn't join with that reunion as bass player. He would actually play some stuff during the South by Southwest Festival. So luckily they were able to get the shows out, even though without Alex, and it really turned into like this beautiful tribute to him. And again, 4 months later, Andy Hummel would die of cancer.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like one thing after another. There was no Big Star anymore. Okay. Now, over the years, there would be various releases, tributes. Michael Stipe would perform Big Star songs at tributes. Michael Stipe being the singer from REM. And then it all kind of, it culminates in this fantastic documentary that we both watched this week called Big Star, Nothing Can Hurt Me. And if you enjoyed us talking about this band, definitely check it out. It's just for a few bucks on Amazon Prime. I'm not sure if anybody else.
You can actually find it on Pluto. Pluto got it for free.
Oh, I got burned. I didn't know. Pluto had it for free. I paid for it.
Yeah, for Pluto. I saw it on Pluto, but you see what commercial? It's about 2 hours and 4 minutes. and it's fine.
That's
I
not
watched
bad.
it like that. I watched it on Pluto, and it was free. And
What
eh,
site on Pluto? Because I don't know what has movies like that.
you know what I did? I just went on Apple TV, and then they gave me whoever had it. And they told me check out for free on Pluto. You can pay $3.99 to rent it or whatever. So I went on Pluto, and they had it. So I don't even know what
They had
channel.
it
It's
for
just
free.
one of the for free. Yeah, but you had to watch it with commercials.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, it's almost a 2-hour documentary anyway, so just two
Yeah, but
hours and 15 minutes or
I
something is
think
not a
the
big deal.
documentary runs like an hour and 50, but with commercials, it's like 2 hours and 4 minutes.
That's not a lot of commercials. That's good.
That's not a lot of commercials. It'd be like 60 minutes. It's not much.
Yeah, yeah. So this is one of these shows that I really got into the research, immersed myself into the music, and I think we have to do a whole show on Alex Chilton. What do you think?
Yeah, we probably will
You
because
know,
he was a very interesting guy. But Mike, how about Eddie Van Halen passing away?
oh, yeah. Now we're always recording ahead of time. I know this show's not going to be up until November.
Yeah,
But yeah, Eddie Van Halen passed away this week. Big loss. What can I say to that? I mean, he's part of my childhood. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a gigantic Van Halen fan, but I have a lot of respect for Eddie. And basically, the David Lee Roth stuff, especially the first couple albums, is what I go to when I do listen to them once in a while.
that's the only
Um,
Van Halen.
yeah, now Sammy Hagar, fuck it. I can do a whole show on how he sucks. But, but he suffered for a long time, Eddie, with the throat cancer. It was almost 20 years, I think, that he had that. They actually had removed part of his tongue at one point. Kind of sad, you know. But he played not that long ago. I think it was about maybe the last time he played was about four. I could be wrong. I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago. He had done something in California, and there's a great clip of it on YouTube. And you listen to it, and I'm like, Jesus, what year is this? It sounded like 1982. I'm like, he's still wailing like that. I mean, the guy was a genius.
Yeah, he
An
was.
absolute musical. All right, there aren't that many rock gods anymore, and he might have been the last one, I guess. I keep, it's funny, we do all these shows, we talk about all these bands, and then, I want to cover some new stuff, and there's just nothing out there that's interesting to me. I don't know. Can you think of any new bands that we'd want to get into?
Not
A
really
few
right
local,
now. There
a
might
few
be
local
local,
bands.
yeah, but there's nothing.
Yeah.
There hasn't really been nothing big. And then the other thing, how about that big shout out we got from
Kelly.
Bill Kelly? Wait, let's talk about
Yeah.
that. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Bill Kelly's been around forever. He's a great DJ. He started out, I think, on WFMU, going back many, many years. I used to listen to him on WFMU out of New Jersey. He jumped over to Little Steven's Underground Garage channel a few years back on Sirius XM. That's channel 21. He has a show called Black Hole Bandstand, and everybody should be listening to this show. Saturday night, if you have satellite, it's on Sirius XM, Little Steven's Underground Garage, channel 21, from 8 to 12, 8 p.m. to midnight. And I've been friends with him on Facebook. We talk sometimes, and I just, he knew about our show. He's actually listened to it. He likes it. Okay, and I asked him. I said, "Can you help us out? Can you give us a plug?" And just took a shot. And if he would have said no, I would have understood. I mean,
Yeah.
he probably doesn't have a lot of control over who he can plug, but he did it. And last night, I sat in my 1989 Chevy Caprice station wagon, all tricked out. You know my car, right?
Yeah.
Because I got satellite in that car, and I sat there between around 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock because he said about that's when it would be plugged, and it was exactly 11 o'clock. He came on, and he just said how, he doesn't always listen to the Underground Garage. There's other great stuff out there, and he found something that he thinks everybody would like, and it's a podcast and two guys out of New York, and he mentioned RockerMike and Rob Rossi, and check out the podcast. And, we told everybody where to look for it on the podcast engines
Yeah.
and to look on the Getting Lumped Up channel on YouTube. And said it was a great show. And I was like, I felt like a little kid, just like, wow, man, just like,
I know. I
just
was like,
mentioning-
what the fuck?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and it was like, I don't know how many people listen to Little Steven, but it's got to be close to like 1 million people or something.
Oh yeah,
I would think it's
definitely.
worldwide. I mean, it's satellite, so it's got to be a lot of people. So I really, Bill, if you're listening, and I really appreciate you doing that, and we will plug your show for from now on too.
Yeah.
So that's all I got for you today, Rob. Big star, definitely. Everybody got to check him out.
Not bad. You got one great guy that actually went on to be to superstar. Man, you got one guy that joined the 27 club, and all around.
That's right. We didn't see Chris Bell was 27 when he passed away. He is part of that tragic 27 club.
It's incredible, and the guy never saw the success or so. Because I can tell you one thing, I have never heard In Space. I haven't even heard that album at all.
It's okay. I like I Am the Cosmos.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for me, Chris Bell, and this is kind of mentioned in the documentary too, and I'll agree with it. He had a way of writing a lyric that was kind of like funny, like a twist. And he would like in I Am the Cosmos, it's basically like, every night I feel like I'm the cosmos, but that'll never get you back. It's kind of like, what is that? All right, what are you trying to say? It's like this giant ego, but it's like still not enough to get you back. So there's kind of like this interesting twist of a lyric.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Really good stuff. So Mike, next week we have the Stray Cats.
The Stray Cats. Yep. About time we got to them. They're one of the best.
Yeah, so that should be good. I also need you to resend me a list of what we do in December, because I can't find it. I got to write it down in my thing.
We've got, I'll send it to you, but I'll tell everybody now, we're doing a show on Frank Zappa. We're doing a show on Grand Funk Railroad. And we're doing a show on The Only Ones, the British band, The Only Ones.
Ooh, Funk Railroad.
All of that was requested. Everybody in the Rock Show podcast group page voted for the December schedule. I had them pick 3 weeks to pick, and we have a 4th week open that we're going to do something special. More about that later. Hopefully we'll have a live show from somewhere on the Lower East Side, maybe 7B, maybe International, maybe both. See what happens. Frank Zappa got the most votes. It seems like everybody wanted us to do a show on Zappa, so I guess we're going to do that as a gift to all you people. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, you know what's funny? I don't know if we do a top 10 list. I'm definitely putting "Fuck Your Feeling" up there. One of my songs of the year.
You want to make "Fuck Your Feelings" the song of the year? I can do that. Maybe we'll do. That was great.
That was
oh man, that was fantastic this week with her.
Yeah. So Mike, how can people reach you if they need to get to you?
Okay, I'm on Facebook under Michael Baker, which is my real name. Also dealing with the Rock Show podcast group page on Facebook. Everybody join that Rock Show podcast group page. Do like a lumped up song of the night, album of the day, all that good stuff. I'm also on Instagram, RockerMike212 on Instagram, and Twitter, RockerMike3. How about you, Rob?
I'm also everywhere. Anything lumped up, if you look Getting Lumped Up anywhere, you're gonna find me. And pretty much you can reach me at robrossi@gettinglumpedup.com. That's my email. Then you can also reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, every platform you can. And remember to watch the show on YouTube and hit that smash button, that like button. And
subscribe and like.
And subscribe to the channel, because we're gonna have we're pretty much gonna start doing some stuff that we're only gonna put on the YouTube channel, and then we're gonna have stuff that we're gonna put on the podcast. So you know what, the universe is changing. Every week we think of a new way of doing
Yeah,
something new.
and you know, baby steps. Okay, you know,
Yeah,
we've been adding a lot of people to the group page. We've noticed that the podcast is hitting more people.
yeah.
Have you looked at any of the numbers lately?
So we pretty much went from 10,000 to this huge jump to close to you know what, 30,000, that we're moving up to 40 now. Like it's moving up. Like we get more and more viewers every day. We had like a record week a few weeks ago. We had over 4,000 downloads. So you know it's moving slowly but surely, but moving to the right direction. And hopefully this plug by Bill Kell help us. You know,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
all
I
the,
hope so.
you know, and all the shows doing good. I forgot this week I put up the Lee Guest show. I put the conspiracy show, Conspiracy 60, and so on, so on. Pretty much I'm trying to put like one or two shows every day up, you know, to keep the people like
Yeah,
new contact. That's what people like. People like something new every day. And if you do 4 or 5 shows and you put one every day, you know, people are always looking for material, don't know what to do. The plug us
yeah,
on, listen to us for a few minutes.
yeah, and you're great at that, Rob. You know, you're always, you know, we're doing the shows, but you're always getting them out there quick. So that's great.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Sometimes I gotta listen to them 2, 3 times because there's a little thing that I miss. Like I had to redo the Dean show because I didn't realize I put the wrong video up, and then I realized, oh, I got this other cut. But in order to listen to the Zeke songs, you gotta listen to the podcast, not the YouTube.
Yeah,
So if you want to listen to Zeke singing all his song, Ezekiel Hagar, you gotta go on the podcast. He got half an hour. He plays a little concert. And
so
also
little bonus material on the audio version. That's good.
on the audio version. So that's the kind of things that I'm going to start doing, putting some stuff, put some stuff on the YouTube. But the Lisa guest interview it looks good. It should be up today on YouTube, and I'm going to put it up on Facebook on the podcast. I'll probably put it up either Monday or Tuesday. But the interview with her on YouTube should be up soon. And once I do that, I'll put the link and put it up, and I'll hit her up too.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right.
Yep.
So, Mike, remember, don't get drunk, get lumped up.
Get lumped up.
See you next week. Have a good one.
Bye.
Podcast you will hear that will be music to your ears. You'll learn about bands you love or may not know, and it's only here on The Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on The Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on The Rock Show. So tell your friends and everyone you know. Let's get lumped up on The Rock Show.